The readings of today place before us two ways of proceeding. One of these calls for achieving what we want through violence, and the other calls for a peaceful way of getting what one is entitled to. These ways are narrated in the first reading of today and in the persons of Abishai and David. Abishai knows no other way but the way of violence to achieve his goal. Though David is aware of this way, he prefers to choose instead the way of peace and concord. Abishai's way would have polarized David's kingdom. It would have resulted in destroying the very thing that David hoped to gain. Aware of this, David chooses the other way, namely the way which seeks to acquire through peace, friendship, and forgiveness. This is also the way that Jesus proposes in the gospel text of today when he invites those who are willing to listen to him to love their enemies and to respond to violence with non-violence. As a matter of fact, Jesus goes even further when he challenges his listeners to bless and pray for the very ones who are violent toward them. This challenge is what Paul too places before the Corinthian community and each one of us in the second reading of today when he makes a comparison between the first Adam and the new Adam, Jesus. If the first Adam was limited, the new Adam, Jesus Christ, is beyond limit. He is limitless. If the first Adam was on earth, Jesus is from heaven. And if the first Adam was physical and made from dust, Jesus is spiritual and from above. The challenge then is to be imitators of the new Adam, Jesus Christ. And as the church journeys on this synodal journey, this is what the church is called to do. All too often, non-violence is seen as cowardice and as weakness, and aggression and violence as courage and strength. However, this is far from the truth. It is in reality the aggressive and the violent who are weak. To seize by force of violence the objects or goals that we desire is often to destroy the very thing we expect to gain, even as David realized this. This is true on the macro canvas of international disputes and also on the micro canvas of family dynamics. It is sad, however, that on both these levels, the way of Abishai has prevailed and the majority seem to go that way. One does not need to look further than the nearest newspaper or television channel relaying news to see how true this is. So many try to force their way through various degrees of physical, political, and even emotional violence. We find it difficult to resist that temptation to force our will on others, to retaliate and even to score. However, even as the readings today point out, there is an alternative way. This is the way of restraint that David practices. It is the way of forgiveness and non-violence advocated by Jesus. However, this alternative requires imaginative discernment of God at work in the midst of our own actions. If we cannot see God's hand, it means that we might tend to give into violence, but the truth is that God continues to work in our world. Qualities of compassion, righteousness, faithfulness, and trust will appear only when we give up our own attempts to force the future and instead choose partnership with God, who constantly gives us our future as a gift and bids us to receive it rather than to grasp it. In our own modern experience, the tendency is to separate human and divine agency in dealing with the issues of violence and power. There are those of us, on the one hand, who expect God to make moral decisions for us or to take the crucial moral actions. We pray for righteousness, peace, and justice, but do nothing to enable it. We treat the Bible as a prescriptive rule book through which we hope God will direct us. On the other hand, there are those of us who imagine that human resources and social action alone are adequate to build the future. We trust only those possibilities that emerge out of empirical data or rational analysis. We do not trust that God is at work. Thus, the challenge before us is to take to heart the way of peace that David took rather than the way of violence advocated by Abishai. It is to take the way advocated by Jesus, who has shown in and through the cross that the way of non-violence and forgiveness is indeed not only the higher way, but the more practical way. In doing so, we will follow the new Adam, who, even in the face of seeming defeat and death, has the ability to give victory and life. In these challenging times that we are all of us going through, it is very easy to get frustrated and upset and angry, and so given to violence. The text of today are calling us to seek that other way, to seek the way in which we do everything that is required of us. We leave no stone unturned, and then believe, like Jesus did, even when we are carrying our very heavy crosses, that God is in control. Our Good Fridays that we are going through during these days and months and years will definitely end in Easter Sunday, the Resurrection Sunday, the Sunday when we will be redeemed. We need to have that faith and confidence that God is in control and that God will never do anything that is not for our good and for God's glory. When you attempt to choose every time the non-violent